Hello, everyone. Welcome. Can you all hear me? Great. We're just going to give everybody a minute to get situated and logged in.
Christy,
Look at that background.
Would you like to?
I'm seeing James. James knows I'm seeing his background. Go ahead.
Christy, would you like to keep an eye on people in the waiting room, and I can keep my eye on the chat, both the chats? Is that okay?
Yes, that sounds good.
Alrighty.
If you haven't already, would you mind putting your microphone on mute? That just helps me focus on what I need to do, and it helps our presenter. Okay, I think we're pretty well set for the moment. So welcome, everyone. It's always so nice to see you guys. I am particularly excited about tonight's presentation because I love Big Bend. And before I introduce our presenter, I have a few notes. So if you'll bear with me while I get through a couple of notes, that would be wonderful. Okay, and we still have people drifting in, so hopefully we can get everybody in on time. There we go. Okay, so hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our Big Bend Archaeological Studies presentation. As always, our hope is that through these events, you'll continue to get to know us. We are the Friends of the Texas Historical Commission, and learn more about our mission to support the Texas Historical Commission in its preservation efforts across the state. We offer these casual yet educational virtual events as a way of showcasing topics of interest to our wide and varied audience. And many of you have chosen to support us with donations, and we are so grateful for that. Thank you. I want to acknowledge our THC commissioners, Friends board members, as well as some of our colleagues at the Texas Historical Commission who are joining us tonight. We're always so happy to see all of you. I'm Christy Peloquin. I'm the development manager for the Friends of the Texas Historical Commission, and I'm joined tonight by our executive director, Anjali Zucci. Anjali is going to be helping us out with our Facebook Live, and so we're grateful to have her. So if you're over there on Facebook, you'll be messaging with Anjali.
Christy, I just wanted to let you know we have folks from Wisconsin joining us as well. So
wow, I love that. Welcome, everybody. Okay, so if you haven't already followed us on social media, please do. This is where we are always messaging about what's coming up, and also on our website. So please connect with us on social media. I know it's another thing to do, but we sure do love communicating with our community on social media. I wanted to let you know that we have an event coming up next month that's called the Flagship of Texas Citrus, which is the grapefruit. Dr. David Laughlin is an assistant professor at the Texas A&M University Kingsville Citrus Center. I bet you didn't know we had a citrus center, and now you do. And he is, he is also, it's located in Weslaco in the Rio Grande Valley, which is the heart of Texas citrus. That's what he wanted us to know about that. And I began working on these virtual events months and months ahead of time. So for example, right now I'm currently working on getting our September schedule together. So again, just want to re-emphasize, keep an eye on our website, follow us on social media. As soon as I can get presenters scheduled, I try to open up the registration. So thank you for being patient with me through that. Okay, a couple more housekeeping items before I introduce our presenter today. Once again, if you don't mind keeping your microphone on mute, that really helps our speaker focus, and it helps me too, helps us focus as well, the audience members. I also wanted to let you know that we are broadcasting this event through Facebook Live. And as always, after the event, we will send everyone who has registered an email, and the email will have a link to a recording of the event, and it will include any additional resources that our presenter mentions tonight or wants to share with you all. So just watch for that email. Probably give me a day or so to get that out to you, but I will send it. And then the process for tonight is that after I get done talking, which will be soon, I promise, I will introduce Bryan. He will give the presentation, and then afterwards we'll have a Q&A. So while the presentation is going on, if you have a question or you think of something, go ahead and put it into the chat. And that way we can keep a running list, and we'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation. And I also want to mention that we really do want to keep the questions related to the presentation itself. So that just helps us keep the presentation on the right track and focused. So thank you. And I do need to let you know that here in Austin, we are having some thunderstorms, and I hope that that doesn't affect my internet and Anjali's internet, but just know we may have a little bit of freezing and lagging, and please just bear with us. There's only so much we can do about the weather. So thank you for your patience. Okay, it is now my privilege to introduce our presenter. As you may know, the Friends of the THC's motto is preserving the real places and the real stories of Texas. Tonight's event helps illuminate the history of a part of Texas which is near and dear to many people's hearts, the Big Bend. To help us learn more, we're joined by Dr. Bryan Schroeder. Bryan Schroeder became the director of the Center for Big Bend Studies at Sul Ross University in 2020. He received his Ph.D. in anthropology from the University of Montana in 2015, where he focused on high altitude hunter-gatherer sites in the Wind River Range of Wyoming. He also holds a BA and an MA in anthropology from the University of Wyoming, where he studied hunter-gatherer conflict, violence, and identity. He has worked throughout Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, Montana, the central coast of California, and of course, Texas. In Texas, his research interests focus on collector collaboration, ancient human and plant DNA, and the distribution of ancient maize. He has ongoing excavations at several of the large rock shelters and caves in the Big Bend region. Dr. Schroeder, thank you so much for being with us this evening and for sharing your expertise and knowledge. Take it away.
Well, thank you. I'll get going here. Okay, and I hope that's working.
Yep, that looks great.
Do that. Okay, so
you want to put that in presenter mode? Okay, there you go. Sorry, Bryan.
Okay.
It took a
All
second to show up. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me. I am going to talk to you about kind of the ongoing research that we have going on at the center. So I'll do that in stages, and hopefully it makes sense. I'm going to cover a huge swath of time. I'm going to cover 13,000 years. But I think it's really important to kind of give you a broad overview of all of it. And yeah, so we're just going to kind of go through what we're doing out here. But first, I want to acknowledge the present day indigenous peoples and their ancestors that called the Big Bend region home. Both the groups we know and those who have been lost to the time. I think this is really important to let everybody just kind of remind everybody that this archaeological record that I'm going to be talking about tonight is the account of their history and ingenuity on the landscape. And I just think it's an important thing to anchor this. And as we'll go through this, I hope you see that the past is very much alive out here in the Big Bend. Okay, so I'm going to give you a brief background of just how much time we're talking about out here. This is the cultural history framework out here, and we're going to carve this up as we go through this. We're focused on little pieces of all this, but there's plenty of research to be had in any one of these regions. But I just want to kind of give you the full swath of indigenous history out here. So currently, without getting too contentious, Clovis is the first most widely accepted culture out here in the Big Bend. And it anchors this at 13,500. A lot of people say 13,200, but we'll add some wiggle room out here. And then out in the Big Bend, we have a couple of Folsom sites up by the Van Horn region that SMU has worked on, and former CBBS John Seebach did a dissertation on those, the Chispa Creek sites. So we know a little bit about Folsom, but they were pretty eroded. By far, what we're going to spend a lot of time on is the emergence of hot rock cooking at about 11,000 years ago. And I'll try to make that kind of realistic. And then, so we're still kind of in that early First Peoples phase. And then we get into that 9,000 to 200 year period that we call the Archaic. And I feel a little bit bad for the Archaic, because the Archaic always kind of gets short shrift. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on there, but it's not the record of the first people. It's kind of a bridge to the late prehistoric period. But I'm going to tell you what we know about that right now. We know that there's a diversity of technology. We know that there's an increased use of plants. I mean, that's the definition of the classic definition of the Archaic period. So we're going to kind of see what fits in this region. And then a little bit, we'll talk about the introduction of the bow just a teeny bit, but we'll get into that period, and then we'll certainly get into the period of ceramics. But I just wanted to kind of let you know that this is kind of the cultural history framework that we'll be using. I won't rely too much on terms with any of these points, and we'll just kind of talk about broad periods. So we'll start.
Bryan, just a quick question. Someone just asked, does BP stand for broad periods? Is that what that is? Before
present. Sorry.
Before present. Okay. Well, thank you. This person was saying this is a dumb question, but I felt equally dumb. But thank you for clarifying that.
Before present, and present is 1950 in archaeology.
Okay.
So yeah. Sorry. Yeah, that's 13,500 years ago, basically. So before present. So that's where we'll kind of start this, but I'm going to mix it up just a teeny bit and take us out of Texas. And first start this. If anybody's seen this, this is some pretty controversial stuff that's going on in the White Sands area, and it's close enough to us that I think we have to acknowledge it. This is work by Matthew Bennett and a whole bunch of co-authors that you've seen. And I'm going to plug, if you haven't seen Matthew Bennett's talk that he just gave for the Crow Canyon Archaeological Research Group, watch it. These are absolutely amazing sites that they're working on. They literally just found a 2- and 3-year-old crawling around in the mud. I mean, it's just phenomenal. But what's more phenomenal is the dates that came out of this. And that's why it's really important for us out here. The dates they got back from that White Sand site are 22,000 to 21,000 years ago. Now, there's a whole lot of things. I'm not going to get into the problems with these dates, but that's much older than Clovis. And that sort of sets up kind of an interesting thing. Whether their dates are wrong or not, they're certainly old, because these footprints are associated with the species of animals that are no longer alive. So we know that they're certainly in the Pleistocene. We know that they're during the Ice Age. So that's a really important thing to kind of anchor this talk. We know that there's people in White Sands at this time period. We know that there's big lakes around there. We know that people are occupying them. The question now is if they got the dating right, and it's 22,000. If it is, that puts people down in our part of the world before the glacial corridor opened up, before Beringia happened, the whole way that we know people classically got in. So that's huge. This is that pre-Clovis period. So that kind of anchors what we're doing out in the Big Bend. If we're this close, I mean, does the Big Bend region have a record of not only Clovis, but these early people? And that's kind of what I'm going to focus on. So in this portion of the talk, we're going to go through, we're the first peoples in North America in the West Texas region, like as the White Sands area suggests. And if so, what does that look like? And what does that record of early first peoples look like? I mean, these are ghost footprints. There's no artifacts associated with the White Sand stuff. This is literally just footprints. So do we have a similar record? Are there tools? What is it? So if you know anything about those first peoples, they're typically thought of as specialized big game hunters. They're super, super mobile folks that are focused on these extinct mammoth Mastodon and Gomopather, these large proboscideans. And we know that we assume that they're hunting them, although some people have started arguing that they might be scavenging. But for our purposes, what's really important is that the archaeological sites are highly visible. I mean, that is this mammoth site bone bed is not a archaeological site. This is a collaborator that we work with that got us this picture. But it gives you an example of what a mammoth kill site looks like. It's a really visible thing. If you're, this is roading out of a drainage or anything, it's super highly visible when you see it. And that's how you find these beautiful fluted points that mark, traditionally mark the entry of humans into this part of the world. So, or into North America. So that's traditionally what we think of. They're following these people. They have a specialized toolkit that's for hunting these things. But I mean, that's an open debate. We don't know if in the Chihuahuan Desert, this record of first peoples would look like this. I mean, I think we have to assume that it doesn't necessarily have to be look like this. So that might be one of the things to keep in mind as we go through some of the stuff I'm going to talk about. So the first thing I'm going to tell you about, just real briefly, kind of that really started our more recent search looking for these early sites, is this site. This is the Sierra Diablo Cave site. It's located up by Van Horn. This was dug by the University of Texas, El Paso, and Dr. Michael Carmichael and Vance Holliday from University of Arizona. They dug this site in the early 2000s, and Javi Vasquez did a master's thesis on it. And what they found is that there was an extinct type of pronghorn in there, and that extinct type of pronghorn was burned and had butchered marks on it. And the dates associated with that heart were insane. They were 35,000 years old. I mean, this is a really, really, really old site. They never published this. They never did anything with this. They presented it in the master's thesis. They presented it at conferences, but they've kind of sat on it. So we've always kind of assumed that these dates and this site were there's something wrong with this site. Recently, we've been talking to them again and about potentially doing work at this cave, and they think that there's actually a pretty good record here for early people, especially considering those white sands footprints. So this one is not dead. It's 35,000 years old. It's too old. There's something happening there. 35,000 years old is really, really old. But this sort of, the point here is that it tells you that these deposits are preserved in caves out here. I mean, we know that this early stuff is in cave. It hasn't eroded away. I mean, this is really important stuff. So we know that the record can be here. I don't know much about this one. We haven't done any more work on there. This is like a real stay tuned thing. We're trying to get access to this one, and hopefully we can get in and get the excavation up and going again. The other really interesting one that shows us that the record here is from Spirit Eye Cave down by Ruidosa. So that cave has a lot of really cool stuff in it, but one of the more interesting things is it's got ground sloth dung from Nothotherapsis shadensis. Now, the collaborator that I'm working with on this, the director for the Hot Springs Mammoth Museum, tells me that these aren't very big ground sloths. These are about the size of cattle, which is a pretty big ground sloth in my world. But these are Pleistocene animals, and they're on the menu. We know that these are being hunted in white sands. There are trackways that people are hunting those. So it's just one more piece of evidence that shows that these caves preserve this early record. None of this is archaeological yet. This is all paleontological. The other really interesting thing that Jim Mead and Chad Yost wrote about this is that the dung preserves keynote species of the Chihuahuan Desert. So we have Lauren tridentata, we have creosote bush in this dung, and for whatever reason this guy was eating creosote, and so we know this kind of fine tunes some of the pack rat environmental data we have here. We know that the desert is kind of looking like the desert at about this time, at about 33,000 years ago, and that's an important thing to know about. That kind of gives us a context of when people, what are people moving into? Like, if people are in here, what does it look like? So this is an important kind of data point for that. And just another quick aside, we went back in April of 2020. This is Dr. Jim Mead, and we found a ton of sloth dung in at this time. We also found a juvenile sloth maxilla, a juvenile sloth claw, and then we found lots and lots and lots of sloth hair. So this cave produces really cool stuff that's going to tell us about this time period when potentially people are living. I mean, this is really remarkable stuff preserved in caves down here. Again, not archaeological, but I think it's super cool, and it's certainly stuff that people were interacting with. So now let's get into kind of some of the sites that definitely seem to have early deposits in them and what we're doing with them. This is the San Esteban rock shelter. It's located south of Marfa. And this site we've known a lot about it for a long time. The Texas Archaeological Society and the center did a joint field school at this site in the 2000s. And actually that's what put us on this cave starting in 2020. So during that field school, there was a falsum point found. This is it right here, preform. This isn't the early stuff, but this is right after Clovis. So this is still early enough to let you know that, those first peoples were in the region. And just for reference, that's what the type site points look like from Folsom, New Mexico. So there's potentially really early stuff in front of this rock shelter. So that gave us a real good indicator that this site could potentially preserve early deposits. So we've been working there since 2019, and these are some of the things I'm going to talk about today. We know that this site, just like the other ones I told you, preserved the Pleistocene. So we have that Ice Age record preserved. We have a really interesting canid mandible that we're trying to sequence DNA from. And if that thing's a domesticated dog, it's a very, very, very early domesticated dog, but those results are still out there and kind of pending. We have a really funky unknown nest that I'm going to talk about. And it's kind of a weird thing that could also be early. But we definitely know that there's 6,300 years of occupation of this cave right now. We think that it's some of the earliest ritualistic use of cave space in the region that we know of. There could be earlier, but I mean, it's certainly in this part of the world. And after about 2,000 years ago, this thing is used almost annually. I mean, this thing is a mega highway, and people keep coming back to it. So the two areas that we focus the most on are kind of highlighted here in blue. Block B and the Sandal Shaft. But tonight I'm going to kind of talk more about the Sandal Shaft. But here's kind of how the occupation of this thing stretches out. So this is if you look at this graph, this is the canid mandible that's super old. It's over 15,000 years old. So it's very, very old. And then we have some scattered stuff in here. This Clovis point is just kind of marking where Clovis should be. And then all the green is the stuff that we know is occupation. All the red is stuff that could potentially be occupation stuff, but we're still not 100% positive on it. So it's definitely old, and we're working on it, and I'll show you why it's a little bit contentious. But we definitely have a really good record about 2,000 years ago, and then we have a great foreshaft cache in there, and we have a lot of really early stuff, and then we have late Paleo-Indian stuff at about in the front of the shelter at about 8,000 years. So, and it looks like that late Paleo-Indian stuff got washed in. So that stuff's not particularly, that might not be in context. So we definitely, from the radiocarbon dates, have 6,300 years of occupation. So what I'm going to kind of focus on is kind of some of the early stuff that we're finding in the back of it. And I'm going to go from really early to about, well, still old, 6,500 years ago. But this is kind of the area that we call the Sandal Shaft. We've dug this over 3 years. We started the excavation in 2020. This has an amazing record preserved in it. And what's really interesting about this part of the site is we could never really figure out if humans were occupying this as a cave or if the roof collapsed and this was a rock shelter. So this is one of the big open questions for this. How are humans using this space? We knew it was the back of the rock shelter or the cave, whatever it was, and they were putting beds against the back of it. So we have these really neat grass beds, and we have some pretty interesting stuff on them. So we have stuff that kind of covers 2,000 years, but it definitely picks up in interest the earlier we go back in time. So this is one of the most interesting things, one of the first glimpses into potentially early occupation we found on the site. So all those white specks you're looking at, those are eggshells. Those are burned eggshells. And then over on the right, there's this dark stain that I highlighted here. And we thought, this looked like kind of like a cowboy camp. It looks like somebody's scooping out a hearth and throwing these burned eggshells. I mean, it doesn't look like much. And so we honestly got really dejected when we found this, because we're about 6 feet down in the excavation. We find this thing that looks like, you should find coffee grounds next to it. It's just cracked eggs and this, dark stain. Well, we dated the eggshell right here. So here's the eggshell discard here. And we came back with a radiocarbon date of 15,289 years old. I mean, so this thing is suddenly older than Clovis. So this is a very, very old feature at the back of this thing. And we had a really kind of tough time explaining this. Like, what is this thing? So in 2021, we did a whole bunch of environmental DNA on this to see if we could find ancient human DNA in that. That's a pending analysis that's still happening, but we cast the whole thing in resin. And we thin section that thing, and we've done what's called micromorph on it. So we basically look at this thing in thin section and see if we can see any kind of combustion in there. Can we see anything? So the consensus that I'm told right now is that it's definitely not it's definitely not a thermal feature. It's not a fire that people created, but it's also not really a nest either. It's something in between. It's something weird. It's just this weird old thing in this rock shelter we have that has eggs in it. So we don't really know where to put that one right now. So that one is that one's problematic, but it's could be, we'd want something better than that if we're talking about potentially being older. So then this year in the back of it, we uncovered this feature. We knew this feature was old because we had a date on the stuff on top of this. There's a porcupine den above this, and we know that porcupine den is 10,000 years old. So we knew that this feature being under it was an old feature, and it's a really, really big fire pit. So this thing is huge, and it's against the back wall, and you're basically on your hands and knees. So this kind of tells us how these first peoples are using the space. I mean, there's no way this fire was this big and they were on their knees at the very, very back of this rock shelter. So almost certainly the roof of this thing was up, and the first people that occupied this definitely were encountering the rock shelter differently. So it's really been a real problem with this is we got one date that was 15,483 years old to about 15,000 years old from this thing. And then we thought, oh my God, finally, we're going to confirm that other thing. That other thing could be cultural after this, because this is clearly cultural. Well, then we decided to send a whole bunch of dates out. We got a whole bunch of wood identified. And it turns out that from 6 radiocarbon dates in this thing, they present 4,600 years of time. So almost certainly this thing wasn't used for 4,600 years or reused. I mean, you can see the ashlands in this thing. This thing was used pretty much once. So we actually have a pretty simple answer for this, and we're going to go there this summer and test this. But we think that what happened is the first people that occupied this rock shelter grabbed a fresh pack rat midden and burned it for a fire. So far from being the really good evidence that this is the record of the earliest folks, it's probably something a little bit easier to explain, and it's people just grabbing kind of a dry pack rat nest and burning it. But we're gonna look at this more. This got some really funky radiocarbon dates in it, but it's certainly older than 10,000 years. We know this. That oldest thing that we dated from this was this. This is a Pleistocene condor bone, and it's burned just like the one in Sierra Diablo. It doesn't look butchered, so it could have gotten incorporated into the fire. And that's probably why it's got that really old date, but it's pretty cool. I mean, it's telling you that these large Pleistocene condors were down here, and maybe humans were there right after them. So another kind of really funky thing in there. But what's probably the most interesting thing that's in the back of this is not, we're going to kind of skip ahead for just a second. This isn't the first people stuff. But what's in the back of this thing is a very, very, very well preserved. We called it a cache initially, but now I don't know exactly what it is. It's certainly people leaving stuff at the back of this rock shelter about 6,300 years ago. Maybe more than once, we don't know. We're having some problems dating sinew on some of these bindings. The sinew looks older than anything else. But there's all this hunted related technology back there. There's these foreshafts from atlatls. There's these things you're seeing with the sinew wrapped on them. Those are actually darts. Those are where the feathers go and knock onto the atlatl. So those are super cool. There's this bracelet back there that's got these olive shell beads. There's this plated mat with this herringbone design on it. And then there's this really funky thing that we called a bow in the field. And everybody we showed it to thought it was a bow as well, but it's 6,300 years old. So almost certainly not a bow and arrow, but we're not real sure what it is. And then this thing on the right is what I think is just phenomenal. So I'm going to show you this a little bit more. This is a pronghorn hide that's been folded. And it's been folded, and a metate has been put over the top of this thing, and it's been covered in black pigment. And there's nothing in it. That's it. And it's at the very, 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 very back of the rock shelter. Now, climate data that we're doing at other sites has kind of shown us that this 6,300 year period is a period of kind of drought in the Big Bend region. And potentially, I mean, this is a working hypothesis. This is just kind of an idea we're kicking around right now, that why this stuff is in the back of this rock shelter is potentially it's a hunting shrine during this period of drought. And maybe this period of drought is when, you know, people start leaving stuff at the back as kind of an offering for hunting. So we just found this summer, but I mean, it's just so cool. The preservation is absolutely amazing. So kind of moving out into open sites, another site that we've been working at for a long time, and we kind of wanted to do more work at with our University of Kansas colleagues was the GLD site, the Genovese Lake Duncan site. So we went back there this year in 2022. We opened up these excavation block because in 2020, in the remnants of a backhoe trench, we found the first buried Clovis preform. This is the first Clovis point found in a buried context in the Big Bend. So we knew this site had early deposits in it. So we wanted to do a whole lot more. So we put an excavation block next to where we think this Clovis point came out of this backhoe trench, and dug there. So this is kind of a climate. This is kind of a, I mean, sedimentary model of it. You don't need to know what any of those numbers mean, or any of those letters. It's okay. The important part is that what we found is a buried landscape at this site that dates to the Clovis period. So about 13,000 years ago to, 13,002 to 12,900. And this summer on that landform, we found actual stone tools. So we kind of confirmed, we got some radiocarbon dates from it. They're not great. They're definitely Clovis age. They're really old Clovis if they're Clovis. So we kind of want to mess with that a little bit more before we talk about the radiocarbon dates. But certainly on that landform, we know that there's stone tools. So they almost certainly couldn't work down because there's this really impenetrable rock layer in there. So we're kind of really excited about this. We're going to do a whole lot more work there this summer. There's going to be some opportunity for volunteers out there on this, and hopefully we can really get more people going. But what's really interesting about this site, and what I kind of alluded to, is that this site is potentially preserves the oldest, at the moment, oldest earth ovens in North America. So if you don't know about earth ovens, this is kind of what makes the desert edible. These sotol and lechuguilla, they need to be roasted, and if you got to convert them into the sugars, into the saponins into edible sugars, and you basically do it in this process outlined here. There's an initial firing, you heat up the rocks, you pack the food layer with a green layer, and you put these bulbs in there, and you put an earthen cap over it, and you roast these things for about 48 to 72 hours, and it leaves this record down here. These are the heating elements that you're seeing. This is like your oven at home. So it's a lot of work for an oven, but it's what they had to do. When we were doing the work out there this summer, we reopened up some backhoe trenches, and we found the deepest oven on the site, and we got super excited, like, oh my God, maybe we have an even older one. Maybe this is our Clovis oven. It's the youngest oven on the site. It's only 9,200 years old. So there's something going on. The landform gets really deep on the other side of the creek. So we're going to kind of work with that a little bit more. One of the really cool things we've done from this is, in addition to finding that buried Clovis occupation, we've also created the beginnings of a climate model from this site. So, and what that shows us is that when people are using those early earth ovens, it's during a period of, or like when things get warmer. So they start to become, they start to be used like when the plant communities start to turn towards the stuff that you kind of think of as the Big Bend when you're out here, all that spiky stuff. So that's a really interesting context to know. We're going to refine this with some more stuff this summer, but this is kind of showing you that this, there's people are kind of responding to the climate out here. But what's really interesting about these is if you look at hot rock, if you look at hot rock cooking any, across this region or into central Texas or over into Arizona, these have a pretty small internal diameter as far as rock counts go in them. So I really started, when we started talking about these, we were talking with colleagues about, I mean, are these things worth the caloric investment? And Phil Daring did some amazing work on these and kind of showed that, after you go get wood and you pack these things, you get about 7,000 calories out of them. You don't get a whole lot of calories out of them. So, what are they doing with these things? There's since been some research coming out that I think kind of complicates this, but, for the time being, I think this is a worthy way to look at these. I mean, what the heck are they doing with these things? So I think there's two ways to look at them. That kind of tacking into that bigger thing that I was talking about when we were talking about, should the earliest sites look like those big bone beds? Well, David Matson in the Great Basin has argued that the transition from the Pleistocene into the Holocene, from the Ice Age into the warmer times, was not one from big game hunting to something else. It was a shift from broad spectrum foraging, so foraging for all sorts of resources, to increasingly very broad spectrum foraging. So I think that might be a really interesting model to look at the Big Bend and these early pits, especially if you get more calories out of them. Right? So this is kind of an open question. The other really interesting thing is when you dig these rock shelters, what you find over and over again is the picture in this bottom right. It looks like absolutely nothing. It's folded material. That is literally just material that is used. That's the foundation for cordage, baskets, all sorts of stuff, sandals. I mean, that's the foundation for everything. And potentially what we're seeing is, people logistically moving into the Big Bend, and these fires are them provisioning their perishable toolkits. And we don't think much about them because they don't preserve that much. So, that's kind of an interesting way, another interesting way to think about them too. And this chart you're looking at here is just a work the late Alston Toms did, kind of showing us how we can maybe think about these things being used, that they precede direct cooking on coals, and that's meat putting on directly on the coals. But the assumption there, of course, is that it's big game hunting that becomes before plants. So if the Big Bend has anything to say, this might not be the model. It might be rock cooking that kind of gets turned into something else. And there's a lot of speculative stuff here, but there's some really interesting things to, I think about, and might be a model moving forward to look at that early stuff out here. So that's kind of where we are on our thinking in the early period and kind of the sites we're doing. We think there's a presence of early stuff out here, but no real definitives other than we're pretty sure we have a buried Clovis component at this site. Just a real quick plug, if you're really interested in earth ovens, this book is apparently going to press right now. Charles Koenig and Miles Miller just put together this amazing book on the latest thinking on hot rock cooking from the arid West. So it's kind of the most recent stuff out there on this. So we're going to kind of move forward now, moving out of the early stuff and into this period. What was archaic life like with that 9,000 to 2,000 year old period? I showed you a little bit from San Esteban. Obviously, one of the most important things are we know that these sites, we know that these earth ovens become a really big staple on the land. They turn into these really big annual things. And there's a lot of really profitable research here. And a lot of this stuff is still ongoing. I mean, I can't talk about the archaic without talking about the importance of hot rock. It's how people lived in the desert. I think there's some really interesting social dimensions to this that folks in that book are talking about, and you can certainly kind of look at these. It's not just burned rock. Then you got to think about people coming together and doing all this. So certainly this is a part of it. I'm not going to say much about it because this is not what I do. but I just kind of don't want to just skip over it to say that this isn't happening. This is certainly happening out here, and it's very, very important. What I'm really interested in, what I think preserves out here, is the hunting technology. And the hunting technology kind of shows you what they're hunting. A lot of folks that look at this stuff kind of show us that whatever the spears and the foreshafts and the atlatl, the size of that is all tuned to the game that they're going after. And we have so much atlatl gear out here that I think it's kind of worth just, this is that dart we found. This is this is the fletching. This is where it knocks on the atlatl down here. So this kind of putting that whole thing together. So we have all this, and I think this is kind of a really interesting way to think about this stuff, is really looking at, what this stuff could be used to. I mean, these darts, these early darts, these 6,300-year-old darts aren't hardwood. They're either yucca or sotol stocks, which seems, I mean, they're certainly resilient. There might be something that bends, but does that change through time? The foreshafts are also sotol and lechuguilla. So we know that that's a lightweight system, whereas these are late archaic foreshafts up here, the red one, and that's hardwood. So maybe they're changing hunting styles, something going on here. So this stuff preserves, and I think there's some really cool angles to go on here. Some real concretes that we have out here, and I think a really important part of the Big Bend, and I think why so many people come out here, is because the montane region is the variability in the ecotones. There's so many different environment. There's pine oak montane, there's the pinyon juniper uplands, and the desert grasslands, and there's the Chihuahuan scrub. And why I bring that up is because this is really, really important if you're a forager on the landscape. If you're a forager on the landscape, you can start doing things differently than you can in other parts of Texas. Or, this is more similar to the Southwest, this variability in resources. So if you're out, kind of in the lower Pecos Canyon lands and those big limestone canyons, you can't forage like you can. There's not so many environments to live off of. And consequently, what you get because of that is you get the early introduction of maize out here. And I think those variable environments are kind of what show you, kind of help you take a bet on this. I mean, horticulture and agriculture are one of those amazing things that humans do all over the world. We simultaneously invent, but it doesn't make a lot of sense because we're not very good at it. Like, how do you start incorporating, plant manipulation into your diet? I mean, if you're trying to go all in on a diet here. So what the way that you do that is you have all these different ecotones. So if your crops fail, you can just go up in the mountains and you can get stuff. You can move around the landscape. So there's some insurance against crop failure. And I think that's a huge reason that we get the introduction of maize out here and not so much far east. So we've done a little bit of work on this, and we know that there's at least a 2,000-year-old history of maize use out here. Maybe older, but for right now, 2,000. And what's interesting about this is we have every part of the plant. We have tassels, stalks, cupules, cobs, the whole everything. So we know that they're growing it. We're positive that they're growing it out here, and they're not just trading for it. And kind of putting that into a much larger picture, this is kind of what that introduction of maize looks like. We know the oldest maize is over in the Tucson Basin. We know it comes up from Central America. We know these red dots in here are some of the early maize that's kind of close to us. Sites like Cerro Huancayo, which is a trinchera site, which is this really cool architectural site in northern Chihuahua. That's got early maize. And then some rock shelters in New Mexico have some really, really early maize. But we haven't done a lot of work dating it down here. The black dots are sites that we know about that have maize that haven't been dated. And the gray dots are sites in the Big Bend that we know have dates in them. So there's a lot of work, I think, to do here and kind of see where we fit into this larger picture of maize and how maize kind of comes into the Southwest, because I think the Big Bend is a part of that larger story. So kind of the last thing I want to kind of jump into is the last kind of 1,000 years. And during that period, we know there's a whole bunch of dynamic and social change that happens in the Big Bend region. And I kind of want to talk a little bit about what we're going to do out here with that and what we're going to look at and what we know. So by far the most famous sites out here are collectively what's called the La Junta de los Rios. It's like Pueblo 4 sites along the river that go down to Presidio, and those sites first dug by WPA and J. Charles Kelly late 30s, and then again in the 1940s. And there's been some work since then, but for the most part, the major push was in that time period. And these are weird outlier Puebloan sites, and there's some really cool stuff on them. And there's not been a whole lot of renewed work on them. And I think that this is a really interesting part of the record out here that we need to do some more work on. So one of them is just finding them. I mean, these guys did a heck of a job excavating. I mean, they really went for it in the 30s and 40s. So these sites have been pretty well excavated. So we really did a concerted effort, and we think we found one of these sites. This is not excavated. We call the site the Canto Rocio site, and we think this site might be associated with some really cool stuff over in northern Mexico with the big Casas Grandes interaction sphere, or it might be part of whatever was going on in La Junta, where we think that people are becoming a little bit more not insular, but they're doing their kind of own thing. They kind of migrate out of the Puebloan world and seem to start doing their own local traditions on stuff. What you're looking at right there is a giant midden with tons and tons and tons of groundstone in it. I mean, this thing is a really specialized burned area that's got all sorts of burned rock. All those little specks are burned rock. But what's really cool from this, and what ties us into that La Junta and Casas Grandes Pacame world, is the ceramics. It's got a really interesting ceramic assemblage on it. It's got Chupadero ware from New Mexico, and it's got these black and reds, these El Paso polychromes, some plain wares, some incised stuff. That's got some potential Pacame stuff happening on it. Got quite a bit of obsidian on it. And the ceramicist that we're working with really likes this stuff that I've highlighted here. He thinks this is convento ware. And if this is convento ware, this is like the utilitarian ware that comes out of the large Puebloan site at Casas Grandes, south of Juarez. So about 200 miles from us. I mean, this is a monster rammed earth Puebloan site, and we're getting some of that pottery out here. And more than that, we're getting the utilitarian ware, just this, the paper plates, which is really interesting. How is that stuff getting out here? It's also got notched pebbles. That we think those are for fishing along the Rio Grande. So it's got some really interesting stuff. So one of the things I wanted to know is, does this site have architecture? So we worked with here's the midden again, and we worked with some folks that do some GPR stuff, and we tried to see if we could find using ground penetrating radar, we tried to find what could be a signature for buried architecture, and it was kind of not super conclusive. And as archaeology goes, it looks like the best stuff is just out of the grid in the northwest portion of this. So it might just be off. We haven't excavated this site yet. It's one of those sites we hope to go to and do some work on, and we'll confirm or deny if it's got some of this stuff on it. J. Charles Kelly knew about these sites that go all the way up the Rio Grande, though, and he commented that these sites seem to be kind of the specialized ovens that were cooking what he called cabbages for mezcal and sotol to go back to the large Puebloan world south, that big Puebloan site south of Juarez. And a lot of people assume that he meant cakes, but talking with other researchers that work on the Casas Grandes area, they think that it might have been some kind of hooch, that he was sending back alcohol. So there might be this really cool, there's not distillation, this is some kind of fermentation that might be happening. And unfortunately, the archaeological record for fermentation is hard to come by. So we're going to try to figure this out, but I mean, there's some interesting stuff might happen here too. And so the last kind of thing I want to kind of get into is the very, very late periods, like the last 500 years, there looks to be a record out here of conflict. I have a hard time parsing whether it's warfare or conflict. If it's warfare, you need a couple of things to be contemporaneous. You need mortuary populations that have indicators of violence. you need defensive sites, sites that are in defensive locations, and those get interpreted different ways. You need site destruction. You need people messing those sites up, and you need iconography. You need something depicting that violence. This is a site in Egypt called Jebel Sahaba. Jebel Sahaba is potentially the earliest evidence of violence that we know of between hunter-gatherers, and that's what you're looking at between. This is what you need in one of the indicators. But the big message you need here is this all has to be contemporaneous. That's the only way you can really argue if there's warfare in the archaeological record. So what do we have out here? We have iconography that seems to be violent. This figure on the left is like one of the coolest rock art. This is, to us, a horse-mounted warrior riding straight at you on a horse with his pistol in his hair. He's got some kind of shock weapon across him, some kind of club, and he's got a headdress on. And then the site down on the right, this is the luchador boulder, and this luchador boulder seems to have people in hand-to-hand, locked in hand-to-hand combat. So we have some iconography that can be interpreted as violent out here. We could probably argue all day about if it is or not, but it sure looks violent. And then we have some sites. We have quite a few sites that look like they could be interpreted as defensive positions. These aren't fortifications. These are sites that are basically areas that you can fall back onto. So this is one of them. So all the red architecture in there is architecture that can be interpreted as defensive. These are U-shaped structures that kind of look off. Now there is some equifinality. There's some different ways to explain this stuff in the archaeological record. So it's not like this isn't a slam dunk, but I think it's an interesting way to look at it. Of course, in hunter-gatherer, hunting architecture and defensive architecture is just going to be similar, just because of the way they build things, the way that they do vernacular architecture. So how that architecture looks on the site is one of the reasons, it kind of gets interpreted in a defensive manner. Other people have made the same arguments outside of this area using kind of the same vernacular architecture. This is in the Pacific Northwest. They built these low-lying rock walls. This is a David Shapey article that talks about these defensive structures being used on what are pretty active canoe pathways and fishing grounds, kind of to preserve fishing grounds. He thinks it's pre-colonial, that this is before contact. And what's really interesting about this is it shows how much military ability these early indigenous folks had. I mean, these are really well planned out sites. But by far the best one, as far as what looks the most similar to what we have, is this site called the Grapevine Creek battle site that we have. We know this battle happened between the Crow and the Blackfeet. Essentially, the Blackfeet build these U-shaped structures on a low-lying butte. They go and mess with the Crow, and the Crow can't really work out how to get a hold of this thing, and then they finally figure out how to breach it, and they breach the thing. And depending on who tells the story, one person left or everybody died. So these didn't work. I mean, you see these a lot, but as a defensive site, this didn't really work for the Blackfeet. So these aren't siege-style fortifications or anything. These are things that are used as kind of like, I always think of it as like that chain that you have on the door. Like if somebody wants to kick your door in, they're really going to kick your door in. I mean, it just kind of helps. It just helps a little bit. But there's a context for these. So I think that there's a record out here to be interpreted as certainly there's an elevated level of conflict. I don't know that it's warfare per se, but certainly groups are thinking militaristically. And there might be some real battles happening, and it could relate to more recent groups moving in. This could be kind of your expression of your Comanche groups and your Nadine, your Navajo folks moving into the area. So I think this is what we're seeing here, and kind of the one of the last things I kind of want to talk about, and I think what's been the most meaningful, though, one of the most meaningful things that we have going on is some DNA work that we're doing from collections, private collections, and those private collections have shown us that the indigenous folks from some of these burials that have been taken out of caves are related to modern populations that still live here. So what you're looking at, that these crazy bubbles that you're looking at, those are the old samples in the middle. So those are two individuals in the middle. And then everything out from that is people who are related. So the more hash lines, the more mutations, the farther away from that you get. So these black and red dots, those are modern people. Those are people that are alive today in this area that are related to the indigenous record out here. I mean, that's 900 years of people living on this landscape, at least from a maternal link. And I know, I'm the first to admit that I know that biology does not equal cultural identity. We can't really say who these people are exactly. But I think what's been really important out here is that the question I get them by far the most is, who are the people out here in far west Texas? And I think this research helped get that conversation going. This research helps us understand that the people that are here today are the people that were here in the past. And that's a really, really cool thing that really makes the archaeological record kind of come alive. I mean, it's always been kind of a removed thing for me. You pick up an arrowhead and you can think about a thing in the past, but here you're literally in the grocery store with somebody that's related to the people that you're working with. And that's just, that's a really cool thing that I think we need to keep in mind when we're working out here. So to kind of sum up this up, I don't have a lot of answers for you. This is a lot of stuff that we're kind of working on. But I think it kind of shows what's going on and the really interesting stuff that's happening out here. We know that we pretty positive we have pretty good evidence for the first occupants. We have ongoing sites at some very deeply buried sites that have some very tantalizing evidence. We think one of them actually has a Clovis occupation on them. We're going to hopefully confirm that this summer. We have that really dynamic period of social change. We have potentially a new La Junta site, or maybe some kind of outlier from the Pacame Casas Grandes world. We potentially have some really interesting stuff with, really interesting military technology and just, how people interact when they're starting to pack into an area. And I think, we're going to keep working on the genetic stuff where we can, and we're in collaboration with the right people. And that work shows us, that the living descendants are in this region. And I think that really, really helps us understand how important this stuff is out here. So that's all I have. I kind of went through a lot very quickly. We're on all the social media that we need to be. If you have any questions, happy to answer them. Thank you all for coming.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much, Bryan. That was incredible. And I love that beautiful picture. That's what we love about Big Bend, right? Those vistas. So we do have some questions. Do you want to stop sharing this, your screen? And I can hear the thunder, so I'm really hoping that I'm not going to lose power or anything else strange. So, so on top of questions, I'm getting a lot of thank you for your presentation. So there's a lot of people really grateful for this information. So please know that. And I will now start going through some of the questions that we have.
Okay.
Let me get back to the top. And for those of you who were asking about the book, I will, that's part of what I'll put in the email that I'll send you all, along with the link to the recording. And if there's any other resources that you have a question about, you can let me know. I'm happy to ask Bryan and see if we can get a resource recommendation. But I will definitely, I think the book you mentioned is a forthcoming book. Is that right?
I was told by the editors that it went to press, I think yesterday.
Okay.
Day before? 2 days ago?
Okay, so just
recently. Yeah.
In case you're having trouble finding it, it might need to wait a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
So questions. Let me get back to the top. Okay. This one is from David. He asks, Does the presence of the sloths point to early people hunting them?
Not yet. These ones seem to be moving into the back of the cave. For what it shows us right now is that that cave preserves the deposits that are the same age as when the first peoples we know are here. So they're not necessarily hunting them. We know they are, well, if you go up in the White Sands, we know that they're tracking them. But in our part of the world, we don't have that evidence right now. Maybe this will be the site. I don't know. But right now we don't
Right.
have that evidence.
Okay, thank you. From Patrick, he asks, in layperson's terms, what do you think is the most important information we can take away from this awesome presentation?
I think for me, I mean, there's a lot of history out here. There's a lot of history, and it's I mean, everybody should learn from it. Everybody should know about it. Everybody should appreciate the past. But I think what's so cool out here is that, like, what I talked about at the end is that, I mean, some of this stuff is related to people that are like still in these towns, and that is just, I mean, that is just like, it's just absolutely amazing to me. So I guess if there's a takeaway, it's just that there's a really awesome archaeological record out here, and there's a lot of really good stewards, and there's a lot of cool people working on it. There's just good stuff, and hopefully we can take this place and really answer some really cool questions about the past that are lingering, and that are of importance to not only our local area, but the bigger picture. So that's that's
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
kind of the
filling
takeaway.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. Okay, another question from James. What do you think was hunted with the Yucca Sotal darts versus what was hunted with the hardwood darts?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a really good question. I would love to figure that out. Maybe more small game. Maybe I just don't know anything about atlatls, and maybe there's some flex there. Maybe, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's one of the things I would love to figure out. I mean, when we get those, there are ways to do it too. If we dig these rock shelters and we know that we're getting more hardwood darts, and then we're getting more deer too, then we can kind of start comparing those at those time periods. We can do some interesting stuff. Or small mammals doing it. I mean, clearly that pronghorn got killed somehow and is the exact same age as both the dart and the foreshaft in that thing. So they might be bringing down pronghorn with those things, and they just have a lighter dart system for whatever reason that I did, we can speculate at. So I don't know yet, but that is a very perceptive and good question.
Thanks, James, for that question. Okay, and this one is from Josh. Does Dr. Schroeder think that there is a real likelihood of Paleo-Indian pre-Clovis levels intact anywhere at San Esteban? I wonder if that question is missing a word.
No, that makes sense.
Okay. Okay.
It fluctuates daily. I thought there was a really good chance when we got those 2 early dates. We did a really good job of picking out the charcoal, and then we got really funky old dates. But we were really excited because they weren't crazy old. They're not 35,000 years old. They're just a little bit older than Clovis. And now I don't know. Now I don't know. I think I don't know. We'll find out this summer. That's another we'll find out. There's certainly a record of first peoples in there. So I'll leave it there. There's certainly an early record. I just don't know how early.
Stay tuned, right? Okay. Let's see, from James again, thoughts about relation between La Junta Pueblos and Humano hunters to the north and northeast. I hope I'm pronouncing everything correctly.
Yeah, that is a really interesting stuff. Jennifer Peel did some really cool stuff here with mortuary populations, and you get these really funky dietary patterns that happen in there. So I think there is people have talked about the Humano, and they talked about the relationship with La Junta. I mean, G. Charles Kelly did all sorts of work on that. Nancy Komatsu did all sorts of really cool stuff. There's a lot of stuff there. And I think that it shows up dietarily. I don't think that we know much more about it from the genetics, but I think some of those old time, I think those old time researchers are right. I think that there's a population of hunter gatherers are moving through those sedentary villages to move out. The only thing that I'll say from a kind of a maize centric focus is that it's really hard to date maize of that time period. So whatever they're trading out doesn't seem to be cultigens like the historic record says, like at least not in that early period. So, and like a lot of that's kind of speculation because we haven't done a ton of work there. So, yeah, I guess I think I don't have much more to elaborate on the relationship other than I think things show that, it's definitely exists and it's definitely people moving just like, some of the ethnohistoric stuff said. And if it's up to us to, confirm that or not, and we just don't have a ton of evidence on that yet. But yeah.
Christy, if I may jump in, I just wanted to share with Bryan that there are folks on Facebook Live that are totally geeking out on all this information. So just wanted to let you know that. And if I may, Christy, I'm going to there's one question on Facebook Live I wanted to just throw out so we don't miss that.
Okay.
It's from Mark Molina, who says, why do you use the term Puebloan for La Junta sites as opposed to Mogollon or something indicating relationship with Pacuim, I guess? Is this because you assume the technology spread from northern New Mexico and Four Corners? And then Mark also has a comment about the artwork that you showed. I'm assuming that's the rock art. He says that is nearly identical to the Mescalero Apache art at Hueco Tanks depicting puberty ceremony.
I don't know which one that is off the top of my head. I don't have a good answer for that. I mean, Puebloan is just, I guess I'm thinking about it less of like a Puebloan expression of folks moving down and more as like maybe initiating. I guess I'm using Nancy Komatsu's idea that she thinks the Jornada Mogollon, it's all archaeological cultures. It's not people. It's just what we name stuff is moving down the Rio Grande. And then there's these localized expressions. And I know that's a contentious issue. So that's probably a term I need to lock down a little bit better because we don't totally have that. That's a great comment and question. And I would love to see the rock art. I would love to see the comparison because I'm absolutely into that. I don't have a better answer than it's just kind of relying on an archaeological culture, and yeah, that can get interpreted as a culture too. So that's a mistranslation. I don't have any inside knowledge.
Thanks, Bryan.
Mm-hmm.
Shall I continue, Anjali, with the list that I have? Or okay. All right, from Karen. How have these structures and artifacts stayed in place tens of thousands of years after they were placed?
It depends. The ones in the rock shelter, they get buried very slowly by wind, so there's not much stuff. But for the most part, that record of what we're doing at San Esteban is not, or even those other sites, it's what's left. I mean, those sites have been really heavily collected for years. So it's like we got like teeny little windows into what's left. So in a lot of places, it's like the hardest part to get into in the site. And that's why it's left, is because nobody crawled in there, and except for us intrepid archaeologists. The other stuff, it just got buried. So that GLD site, that site is kind of on a confluence of creeks, and there's just overbank deposits happening there. So it's just, these silty things are happening and they don't wash stuff out. So that's the problem with the early record, is that, it gets eroded out very quickly. I mean, not very quickly, there's just so much time acting on it that you lose it. It's kind of the opposite of quickly. So yeah, there's a lot of right things coming together that keep those sites where they are. So, in a lot of ways, we're just getting a glimpse into, these windows into this really deep past, but the right preservational things have to come together for that to ask, to then we got to find it. And out here,
Yeah.
they're deeply buried.
Great question. Thank you, Karen, for that. Lisa asks, which site do you feel is the best hope for getting positive evidence of the first occupants? Which
I think
do you think?
I think we'll definitely find. I think we definitely have an early record. I think we have a Clovis component at GLD. So I think if nothing else, we certainly have what is the traditional model that those are the first folks. So we definitely have it there. St. Esteban, I don't know that site. That site, it might have it. It might really have that early record. I mean, we got to do a lot of work to prove that you got to be your worst critic when you start finding that stuff. You have to think of all the ways that it's not that old before you say that, because what you're doing is you're pushing back archaeological convention. So, you got to think of the ways to kill it. So that's why we have so many weird dates from that one, is we had to make sure that, it was right before it's not right. It's 4,600 years in one thing, but that site goes a long way the other way. And I think that the roof fell down and sealed that very early record. So that one's where I got my chips.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Can I jump in with one more question from Facebook Live? It's from Bailey Larimore, who says, I was wondering if the White Sands and Sierra Diablo cave dates are correct. How would this shift archaeology moving forward? And he thanks you for a great presentation as well.
I don't know on the White Sands footprints. I think it's been demonstrated that the White Sands footprints are too old, because the way that those seeds absorb carbon, and this is going to get a little bit geeky for a little bit, it makes them look older than they are. And I think that that's been pretty well demonstrated. If we go pick that same grass right now and date it, it looks older than it is. So I think those dates are wrong, and I know that those dates aren't 35,000 years old in the Sierra Diablo. The question is, how old are they? I thought when we talked with them, they didn't do anything with it because they thought those dates were so crazy that the site was messed up. But when we spoke with them about their excavations, they said they did everything like what I just talked about. They did everything to try to kill those dates, and they couldn't think of a really good way to do it. And they needed one more field season out there, and it just didn't materialize. So we were going to try to pick up that one field season and see if we could help them figure that out. And it's there's some ownership things, and we're trying really hard to get out there. And so we'll see. If they're 35,000 years old, I don't know. I mean, people are going to hate it. Some people will love it. Some people will hate it. It'll become contentious. It will. So we'll see. It just depends on how much we nail that down.
I guess that love or hate thing is something that you archaeologists are going to probably debate about. For us lay people like us, it's just mind blowing. I guess that's all you can say about it.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest problem with it is that it puts people down in the continental U.S. before the ice sheets open up. Right. So however that happens, that's phenomenal. So that kind of throws out our conventional ideas of how people get into North America. I mean, obviously there's boat technology, but it's then they kind of skip across. So I don't know. I mean, the oldest accepted site right now is in Chile. It's 14,200 years old. So that's, I don't know. When I was an undergrad, this stuff was done. It was like Clovis first, we're done. And now it's just like, I don't know.
One additional question from Facebook Live from David Shane Duke, who, by the way, has been dropping at some point. Bryan, you may want to go onto our Facebook Live and look at all the comments, because he's been dropping a lot of information in there. But he asks, is the layers of El Polvo, and I'm going to butcher this, Tepalcombs, provide as past directors of the Center for Big Bend Studies suggest, El Polvo crossing will potentially show earliest evidence of occupation. Where Kelly did his work, is he's making that reference.
Potentially. I mean, I guess I don't really know. We haven't done any more stuff there, but I mean, I mean, yeah, it could have really early deposits. I mean, is that what you're asking? Is there earlier stuff there? I mean, they're very well.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's asking if those layers will potentially show earliest evidence of occupation. Layers of El Polvo.
Potentially. I mean, the river, I mean, if you're down at El Polvo, those sites, they're not going to have a ton of old stuff just because of the way that the river worked, because the river's so dynamic, it can wash it out. There's been a really cool study that Charles Frederick did with some folks, and they looked at they just dated a bunch of stuff on the Rio Grande. There's like a bunch of charcoal down the Rio Grande, and they never got anything older than 2000. So it's a potential. I mean, people love that spot and people need water. So I don't know. I don't have a great answer for that one either. I feel like I'm giving you guys a real wishy-washy answer.
No, he's just referencing. Yeah, he's referencing the route of the Mayans. Route de Maya.
That is way outside my wheelhouse. I'm not even going to speculate on.
There we go. Well, that answers that.
When we get into the Mesoamerican world, I am. That's not. I don't know much there. That's where I get. I don't know a lot about that, so I don't know.
Bryan, you're giving us great answers. I mean, it just shows how much more we still have to figure out, right?
Or you got to get somebody who knows more about Mesoamerican stuff.
We need more researchers.
Yes. Yeah.
It takes a village to figure out our past.
Absolutely takes a village.
Yep. Anjali, anything else from Facebook Live? Okay, moving on here. And by the way, folks, we'll go to about 7:30, and that's all the time that we will make Mr. Schroeder give us from his day. So a few more questions. So this is from David. Any comments on the Seminole Canyon area? Fate Bell Shelter, how old?
I think Shumla's just dating that. I think Shumla just published some dates on. I think they just dated Fate Bell, but I can't remember them off the top of my head. I mean, if you're talking about the rock art, I think that rock. I don't want to steal any of Shumla's thunder. If you don't know, they do all the rock art in that part of the world. They do amazing stuff.
And is that an organization just for our folks who?
Yeah, that's
Let's put that in our resource list.
Yes, they do all the rock art in the Lower Pecos. They have offices in Comstock, and then they do. They're also out in Texas State's campus. Carolyn Boyd has done a whole lot there. I mean, she's founder of Shumla. So they have. So I don't know those dates off the top of my head, but I don't think they're super old. And I don't want to steal any of the thunder or misquote any of their dates. So I know they have that info, but check out Shumla though. That's where you can definitely find that info.
Okay, and I'll put that in the resource resource list that we're going to send out after this, so folks can check that out. Okay.
Deposit-wise,
all right, go ahead.
Deposit-wise, I don't know. I don't know if anybody's done any real excavation there to see how much it is. I know over Eagle Canyon, just right in there, that team with Texas State, the ancient Southwest Texas, is finding all sorts of old stuff. That's where Kilby and all are finding the bonfire that they've done a lot. And then Charles Koenig is finishing his dissertation on Eagle Cave, and Eagle Cave has really old deposits in it, probably Clovis Age deposits. So
wow.
I don't know if they have anything earlier.
M. Hendricks just has a comment, or I guess it's a question. I think he's saying he has photos of petroglyphs from a ranch between Study Butte and Alpine, and also grind holes.
Anything anybody wants to show me, I'm more than happy to talk about it. They want to show me, that's fine. I mean, whatever anybody's comfortable with. I'm not,
Bryan, is it okay if I share your email address when we send the resource list, or a way to contact you? Okay.
Yeah.
So M. Hendricks, we watch for that on the email, on the follow-up email. Maybe you can share that with Bryan. Okay, so from Jimmy, great talk. Where are the obsidian sources located? Do you know of any Rio Grande River gravel sources for obsidian large enough for lithic use?
So we just actually went out and did exactly this. We just went out and tried to find the obsidian sources, and we found a whole bunch of rhyolite domes. So a whole bunch of stuff that probably was obsidian at one point, but is too old. And we have a source out here. We know what we do. It's called Texas Unknown A, and we thought we were going to find a vein of it somewhere in one of these domes, and so far we haven't been able to find this thing. So there is. So now we're thinking that it's probably it's probably a Rio Grande source. And for those of you who don't know, you can source obsidian, and I can tell you how people are moving across the landscape. We get a bunch of different types of obsidian down here, and the Mexico sources are probably people actually coming from Mexico and bringing them. The New Mexico sources are probably stuff just rolling down the Rio Grande. So we thought Texas Unknown A was going to be a primary source on this side of the river, but right now it doesn't look like it. So that is also one of those things you have to check back to, but we think we've narrowed it down to a river source. So.
Okay.
But yeah, you can nap it too. I didn't answer that part. You can make tools out of it. We have tools out of it.
Christy, do you still need me to take over? You're having tech issues?
I got it. I don't know. My headphones just cut out on me for a sec, but I think I'm back. If you guys can hear me fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So strange. Okay. From Jim Robertson, do you or can you do excavations in Big Bend National Park and Big Bend State Park?
We're thinking about we're going to try to maybe reopen a site that Tom Alex opened called the J. Charles Kelly site. It's in the Chisos Basin. They didn't get to the bottom of that site. That might be another really good contender for a really early site out here. That site actually is, I was going to put it in and talk about it a little bit more. But yeah, we're going to approach the park about potentially opening up that site. Well, the University of Kansas is. So there'll be ongoing stuff going on there. So potentially there. And that's because they're going to do some construction there and it'll be open anyways. And so it's just kind of a good time to see if we can get to the bottom of that site. They never got to the bottom. So it'll be a really confined thing. But if that happens, check out our stuff. We'll let people know. So
Yeah, if you haven't already checked out the Center for Big Bend Studies website, there's a lot of information on there, and we'll definitely include a link, not a leak, in the resource email. So yes, and if you happen to be in that area, there's a cool place to stop by and see as well. Okay, so from Vivian, she's just saying fascinating information about what must be one of the world's most interesting places. So just a comment. From Joseph, as a question, will there be another presentation after your summer work? Very good and interesting presentation. Since I'm from West Texas, I must still be among my people.
Yeah, I mean, that's, if you want me to, I'll come back and I'll tell you, hopefully we can answer some of these things. I mean, there are a lot of balls in the air. Maybe we'll have a lot more nailed down. So yeah, we have a couple folks working on dissertations right now, and hopefully they get to dissertating and we can answer some more stuff. So yeah.
We would love
Maybe
to have you back.
Yes, I think we might have to check in with you annually and see what's going on, see what's new. I would love that for sure. From David, not sure if, let's see, he's just asking, where was your work in Central California?
The Atascadero area. Actually the intersection where James Dean died.
Oh.
Yeah. That's where he turned, and it was a big solar farm in there, and it was a very interesting project. It was a very large Chumash cemetery that they had to move because a solar farm was going in there. So it was it's a very interesting topic. I only worked there for 1 year, only one season.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're getting towards the end of our list. Josh Collins is saying, Dr. Schroeder, can you mention volunteer opportunities again? And that's also something maybe we could put in our follow-up email.
Yeah, we
if
have some dates
if there's
for-
information.
Yeah, I can give you those dates and we can put them out there. But I know everybody who we're going to start May 15th, and there will be 10-day sessions. You don't have to come through the whole thing, but we're digging the potential Clovis site May 15th to June 7th. Then that's 2 10-day sessions, and then that's probably our best volunteer opportunity this year, because the rock shelters site, it's going to be such a focused area that we're just not going to have a lot of folks, be able to get a lot of folks in there.
Okay.
We might do a tour though, but if we do a tour, we'll let people know and we'll give people an opportunity to sign up for that. So
Will that be through the Big Bend Center for Big
yeah,
Study?
yeah.
My mouth is starting to not work.
Yeah, no, hey, I get you. I get it.
Okay, well, that'd be great. Yeah, that way folks can go to that site and check that out. And any information that you can give me, Brian, that I can include in the email that I'll send out, that'd be great. A question from Patrick that I accidentally missed in the list was, he's heading to Big Bend Ranch State Park tomorrow. Are there any sites a civilian can visit?
I don't really know that much about there. I mean, I really don't. I mean, check in with the visitor centers and see what they got. Yeah, I think that's probably your best bet. Really, and certainly talk with them, make sure it's okay.
The rangers know so much
Yeah,
about
the
those
ranger.
sites.
Yeah, the rangers. Yeah.
Okay, another question from David. How can some of these sites be protected from innocent individuals damaging or corrupting just from accidental discovery? Are most on private ranches in Texas?
Most are in private ranches. I'm glad nobody said anything about maps. It deliberately didn't put maps because they're on private ranches, and landowners are okay with it, but I kind of want to kind of preserve what I can. Honestly, I'm the biggest proponent of if accidental discovery. If there's accidental discovery, people know what to do. Just kind of cover it up. You can call professionals, and if I don't know how to do it, I'll sure kick it around to somebody that can help you. Or if we're too busy, I'll let you know. But I think beyond that, preservation, the best preservation is education. I think if you let people know what they have, and don't say, this is my thing, I think people are the best stewards of resources. Especially out here. So, they have to be. So all I can do is tell you how cool the stuff is, and it's kind of for you guys, to help me preserve that cool stuff. Archaeology is inherently destructive, though. So
THC, the Texas Historical Commission, has the Texas Archaeological Stewardship Network as well, and I can provide some links to that when I send out the list too. Obviously, THC has an archaeology division, and they've got folks there that can answer questions too. So
right.
So I've got one last question. I think it's our closing question for the evening. Have you found, it's from Ronnie. He or she, I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Ronnie is asking, have you found any burial sites in the shelters?
We have not found any burial sites in the shelters. Burial sites were found in the shelters, but we have not found any in there. I hope there's nothing in there. I don't want to find any burial stuff. I don't really want to do anything with people. The stuff that we got DNA from are in private collections that people already dug. So everything else, it's not us going out and digging things. And honestly, I don't think I would move any burials. I would leave burials exactly where they are. I think that's where we are now. I don't think we need to take that stuff. Then it gets hermetically sealed in an office, and it's not where it needs to be. It's it's where it's supposed to be, where it is. So,
right. There's bigger cultural considerations.
Yeah, and you don't need to. Yeah, there's bigger cultural considerations, and certainly if you work with descendant communities and landowner, and that's like the best option for something, then maybe that's what's got to happen. But that's not where I'd jump to initially. But that's kind of a tangent in saying that, no, we have not done any, we have not dug anything from any of the shelters. And I just want to kind of remind that the shelters are working and are so collected that we're like just in small little pieces of them. So that's just the way it is out here. So
Well, this has been absolutely fantastic. Anjali, any final closing comments from Facebook or?
I just wanted to share nothing from Facebook, just many thank yous, Bryan, from Facebook, and people are already sharing the live video with friends who they think will be interested. So that's wonderful. Bryan, your colleague Michelle Lacey had one site that she wanted to share with Patrick since he's visiting the site. She says there's one rock art site along the road to Sauceda Ranger Station, but the rangers can definitely advise best. It's called Cuevas Amarillas. So ask the ranger station, and I'm sure they'll point you to the right place. So, but that's it.
Great, thank
That's
you.
all we have.
Thank you. And Bryan, I am also seeing lots of thank yous and appreciation for your presentation. So we're grateful. I know this community of attendees that we have at these virtual events is always grateful for our presenters, and especially if it's a topic near and dear to their hearts, which Big Bend is for a lot of folks. So thank you.
well, thank you for having me. Thank you for the great questions.
And we will bother you in the future to come back.
Please do.
Tell us
Please
more
do.
things.
Hopefully I'll have more answers.
Or more questions, right?
Yeah.
More questions, more answers. So for those of you in attendance tonight, watch your email inboxes tomorrow, and I'll get that list of the books for you and the resources. And I really want to encourage you to sign up for our Grapefruits virtual event, which is coming up. And the month after that, we have another event called From Hope Chests to, I'm trying to remember, Hope Chest to something, but it's about how
Hope
women.
Chest to museums, how
Thank
women
you.
saved the West.
Oh, yes, it's the idea that because women are naturally sort of the caretakers of things in the families, that things get passed down and they become preservationists in a way. So that's going to be the Panhandle Plains Museum. Research archivist there is going to give that presentation, and that's also going to be a great one. So hope to see you at future events, and I'll talk with you soon. See you all later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bryan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.